You're listening to the Daily Mishnah Podcast with Benedict.
Much of the 9th chapter of Ketubot deals, as we've seen, with questions as to whether the husband can force the wife to swear an oath, essentially that she hasn't embezzled. And the 9th chapter then concludes with situations where the husband seems to be no longer around, or maybe he's around, maybe he isn't, but she can only collect her ketubah. So she's already divorced, or maybe he's dead. He might be dead, or she might be divorced, but she can only collect her ketubah by swearing an oath. So in other words, it's to her advantage to swear the oath. And there's a general principle in financial law, in Jewish financial law, that if there are two witnesses, it's possible to prove something. Fine, you can prove something with two witnesses. But if there's one witness, the matter's not completely clear. So if there's one witness, it's very common to ask one party to swear an oath. And effectively, swearing an oath is equivalent to, let's say, pushing back on the evidence of one witness. Yeah, in the scales of justice, one oath stands against one witness. So we'll see how this works. Hapogemet ktubata loti para ela bishvua. Someone who impairs hapogemet. A pagam is an impairment. Someone who impairs her ketubah can only be paid out with an oath. She has to swear an oath to get paid out. We don't really know what it means to impair a ketubah. We don't know. But we've seen before, right, running right through the Mishnah of Ketubot, and for that matter of Yevamot, quite often the Mishnah articulates a principle that we don't understand, and then subsequently explains it. And this is what's going to happen. So in a minute, we'll explain what impairing one's ketubah is. So let's just hold on to our horses and go with the flow, and we'll find out in a sec. So, someone who impairs her ketubah can only be paid out with an oath. And if one witness testifies against her that it's been paid or she's been paid, that means she's already got the money, she can only be paid with an oath. She has to swear that she hasn't been paid. From property which was mortgaged, or and from property belonging to orphans. This is where the husband died. And when she gets paid out from someone who's actually not present, so he's not there to supervise what's going on, she can only be paid out with an oath. So when there seems to be some kind of question of doubt, she needs to swear an oath in order to assert her rights for the ketubah to be paid. And the next Mishnah is then going to just articulate these situations in a bit more detail. Hapogemet ketubata keitzad. Someone who impairs her ketubah, how? How does it work? Keitzad, how does it work? So the Mishnah is going to explain. Hayta ketubah elef zuz amar la hi kabalt ketubati v'hi omeret lo hi kabalti ela maneh. Her ketubah was for 1,000 zuz. It's a lot of money, 5 times the regular amount. He said to her, you've already received your ketubah. So she's making a claim. And he says, no, I paid you the 1,000 zuz. And she says, no, I only received a maneh. A maneh is 100 zuz. So she claims she's only received 1/10 of what she's due. Loti para ela bishvua. She's only paid out with an oath. She has to take an oath. And I think the assumption of the Mishnah here, I mean, there's no witness. I think the assumption of the Mishnah is that someone who admits first of all, someone who admits a partial truth in a civil case has to swear an oath. In other words, she's clearly admitting that she's received something. And it's possible that the person paying out might remember better what he paid out than the person receiving. Anyway, we're going to resolve it. She's going to swear an oath. And we assume people take an oath very seriously. We assume they're not going to lie under oath. And one witness gives evidence that she's been paid. Ketzad, how does that work? Amarla, hi kabal ketubotech, v'hi omer lo hi kabalti. He said, I'm sorry, the translation is really wrong on this source sheet. He said, you've already received your ketubah. And she says, I didn't receive it. And one witness testifies against her that she did receive it. Loti para ela bishwa. She's only paid out with an oath. She has to swear an oath. From mortgage property. Ketzad, how does it work? Here's a really interesting quirk, by the way, in the Kaufman manuscript. So the Kaufman manuscript says, Machra nechasav la'acharim. She had sold his property to others. We don't really understand how, by the way, how this works. It's interesting that the printed edition and the Vilna edition says he, by the way. He sold, and we can kind of understand that a bit better, actually. Let's go. Either she or he had sold his property to others. Vehi nifrat min halakuchot, and she seeks to recover payment from the buyers. So the halacha is that if you sell mortgage property, the mortgage doesn't disappear. So if you like, in halacha, if you sell mortgage property, then the buyer has to beware, because the buyer has basically paid good money for mortgage property, but the person who has the mortgage on the property can come and collect it. So the buyer is basically left without holding anything. And you can see, by the way, why the buyer might find this a bit unfair. And you can sort of understand why the halacha then says, Loti para ele bishwa. She's only paid out with an oath. So when there are other people involved, she's only paid out with an oath. It's going to be the same with the orphans. Mate, he had from the property of orphans. How does it work? He died and he left his possessions to his orphans. Nifrat mina yatomim. She tries to get possession, to get paid out from the orphans. I mean, they're holding the estate. Remember that she has her ketubah, if you like, it's considered a mortgage on all his property. So all his property is mortgaged to the ketubah. So if he sold it during the course of the marriage, it's still mortgaged to the ketubah. So she can go back and collect. And similarly, his estate is mortgaged to the ketubah. She has first claim on it. So she can claim from the orphans. Nifrat mina yatomim, lo tipara ela bishva, but she's only paid out with an oath. Veshilo b'fanav ketzad, and someone who's not present. Remember, that was the last example in the previous Mishnah. How does that work? Halachlo limidilas hayam. Someone went to a country beyond the sea. Vahinif, and that's code really. Going to a country beyond the sea really is code for someone who is just not communicable with. And I guess in those days, if you were beyond the sea, well, they didn't have Mission Post. He went across the sea. And she seeks to recover payment in his absence. Loti para ela bishvua. She's only paid out with an oath. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Kol zman shehi tovat ktubata hayorshin mashbe'in ota. So Rabbi Shimon actually says, whenever she claims her ketubah, the heirs may make her swear an oath. And it's very interesting. Through the whole of this, the preceding elements of this chapter, we've learned that there are situations where the husband can write, I don't require an oath from you. Now, Rabbi Shimon seems to disagree, by the way, because he says whenever, holds mum, whenever she claims her ketubah. the heirs can make her swear an oath, seems to override any contract that the husband might have written during his lifetime. But there's always a but in the Mishnah. Im eina tova ketubata. If she doesn't claim her ketubah, and she doesn't have to claim her ketubah, she can actually live in the husband's house as long as she likes. And I think we're going to see a little bit more about this in future chapters. And of course, we've already learned that if she goes back to her husband's house, she has the status of a steward. I mean, that's one of the reasons why she might be called upon to swear an oath, just to establish that she's dealing correctly with his possessions. But she's got the right to live in her husband's house and be maintained from the estate. And so she doesn't need to collect her ketubah. She can just live there quite happily, long as she likes, at least until she gets married, until she remarries. Im eina tova ketubata, if she doesn't claim her ketubah, ein hayorshin mashpe'in ota, the heirs cannot make her swear. So again, Rabbi Shimon seems to disagree with the halacha that we learned earlier in the chapter, that if she is actually more or less in charge of her husband, her deceased husband's affairs, then they can actually make her swear an oath.
Thank you for listening to this edition of the Daily Mishnah Podcast with Benedict.